Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Modern humans, we've only been around for about 300,000 years. So what was happening on our planet before we showed up? Was it just empty? Or could there have been other advanced civilizations that came before us? Civilizations so ancient that all traces of them have been wiped away. This is the heart of the Silurian hypothesis, a fascinating scientific thought experiment proposed in 2018 by astrophysicist Adam Frank and climate scientist Gavin Schmidt. They asked a simple but mind-blowing question. If an industrial civilization existed on Earth millions of years ago, would we even be able to tell? The hypothesis is named after the Silurian period, a time over 400 million years ago when life was thriving in Earth's oceans. But the name is also a nod to Doctor Who, where the Silurians are an ancient reptilian species. It's a clever way to frame the idea, but the science behind it is serious. So, if there were advanced civilizations before us, where are all the ruins, the tools, the skyscrapers? Well, that's the thing. Earth is a master at recycling itself. Our planet is constantly changing. Mountains rise and fall, oceans become deserts, and entire continents shift over millions of years. Processes like plate tectonics, erosion, and volcanic activity are like nature's cleanup crew. Think about it. If humanity disappeared today, how long would it take for all traces of our civilization to vanish? Scientists estimate that within a few million years, even our toughest structures, like skyscrapers and nuclear waste sites, would be ground into dust and scattered across the planet. So, if our civilization can disappear so completely, what chance do we have of finding evidence of one that existed hundreds of millions of years ago? This is where Frank and Schmidt's idea gets really interesting. Instead of looking for physical evidence, they proposed searching for chemical fingerprints in Earth's geological record. For example, carbon isotopes. Burning fossil fuels changes the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-13. If an ancient civilization used industrial processes, we might find these anomalies in ancient rock layers. Nitrogen levels. Synthetic fertilizers could leave behind unusual amounts of nitrogen-15. Radioactive isotopes. If they used nuclear technology, we might find traces of plutonium-24 or iodine-129. Elements that don't occur naturally in large amounts. But here's the catch. Natural processes can also produce similar chemical signatures. For example, massive volcanic eruptions can release huge amounts of carbon dioxide, altering isotope ratios. So, how do we tell the difference? One of the key pieces of evidence Frank and Schmidt looked at was the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, PETM, a period about 56 million years ago when Earth's temperature spiked by 5 to 8 degrees. This event released a massive amount of carbon into the atmosphere, similar to what humans are doing today. Could this have been caused by an ancient industrial civilization? It's a fascinating idea, but most scientists aren't convinced. The PTM was likely caused by natural processes, like volcanic activity or the release of methane from ocean floors. Plus, the rate of carbon release during the PTM was much slower than what we see today. So, if the PETM wasn't caused by ancient factories, what other clues could point to a lost civilization? Some researchers have suggested that dinosaurs might have been more advanced than we think. Take the Troodon, for example. This small bird-like dinosaur had a large brain relative to its body size, binocular vision, and grasping hands, traits that suggest it could have been capable of complex behavior. Paleontologist Dale Russell even speculated that if dinosaurs hadn't gone extinct, Troodons might have evolved into intelligent, human-like creatures he called dinosauroids. But let's be real, even the smartest dinosaurs were probably nowhere near building cities or launching rockets. So, what about something even stranger, like a civilization based on fungi? In 2000, a Japanese biologist named Toshituki Nakagaki conducted an experiment that blew everyone's minds. He placed a slime mold in a maze with a sugar cube at the end. Within hours, the mold figured out the shortest path to the sugar without a brain. This raises a wild question. Could fungi or other simple organisms have formed some kind of ancient intelligent network? If so, their civilization would leave behind no physical traces, just subtle chemical clues. Of course, not everyone is on board with the Silurian hypothesis. Critics point out that there's no direct evidence, no tools, no buildings, no artifacts. All the proposed chemical traces could be explained by natural processes. Evolution makes it unlikely that any species before humans could have developed advanced technology. So, was there an ancient civilization before us? The answer is, we don't know. But the Silurian hypothesis isn't really about proving the existence of lizard people or dinosaur engineers. It's about challenging our assumptions and asking, what don't we know about Earth's history? And who knows, maybe one day we'll discover a clue that changes everything.
Strange and amazing items are discovered often, but figuring out what our ancestors were up to is pretty tough. Especially when all you have are just some rusty cups and cave drawings. It's no surprise that even the experts in lab coats sometimes make mistakes. But it's not just about dusty plates and huge stones. Sometimes there's even humans with large heads. So grab your digging tools and let's travel back to ancient times to explore incredible societies that even scientists can't fully explain. Sardinia may look idyllic now, but I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't fancy visiting it 3,000 years ago. Rumor has it, terrible giants roamed around this island back then. People even talk about finding human skeletons over 13 feet tall there, although nobody's ever shown anything to prove it. But the stories will make you wonder because some weird stuff has definitely happened. In 1974, over 5,000 pieces of broken stone artifacts were found in a part of the island called Monte Prama. But instead of being displayed in a museum, they were locked up in an underground vault for about 30 years. Sounds a bit suspicious, doesn't it? When they were finally displaced in 2005, scientists put the pieces together to find statues of 38 giant men standing 8 feet tall. Not quite as tall as the legendary skeletons, but still pretty huge. It's thought these statues were made by the Nuragic people, who lived on the island a long time ago. Besides giant statues, they also built over 8,000 massive stone buildings. Perhaps Nuragic weren't giants themselves, but they definitely liked their things big. I do too. I like a big number of likes on our videos. That would be pretty great. Thank you if you liked this and subscribed. Now back to the video. You and I are pretty smart, but we might not be the smartest humans ever. Actually, we might not even be the smartest species. Since 1913, some skull fossils found in South Africa have hinted at a possibly smarter contender called Boskop man. This human-like species might have lived as recently as 10,000 years ago. Their skull suggests they had really big heads, which means their brains could have been 30% bigger than ours. Wow! Their average IQ could have been around 149, making them among the smartest 0.05% of people today. But if a Boskop brainiac was so much smarter, why are they not around and we are? Well, bigger isn't always better, you know. Our brains are a lot bigger than our ape relatives, mainly in the prefrontal cortex. This part helps with high-level tasks like making decisions, remembering things short-term, and being aware of ourselves. The parts of the brain that handle our senses and movements haven't really grown much. So, maybe the Boskops spent too much time dwelling on the past rather than doing practical things like hunting. But this is all just guessing. We really don't know what happened to these clever cousins of ours. Some people even argue that Boskops weren't any different from us, with the only evidence being parts of skulls. The jungle is huge. Did you know the Amazon rainforest is home to about 30% of all the world's plant and animal species? That's impressive. However, the history of one native species, humans, has long puzzled scientists. The mysterious Kasarabe people lived here for hundreds of years and then vanished around 1400 AD. People thought the Amazon only had a few scattered tribes, but recently we discovered big, unusual shapes in the ground called geoglyphs. These might look like simple shallow ditches, but they're actually the remains of a vast civilization that spread over 5,000 square miles and includes about 450 markings, some as wide as 1,300 feet. That's insane! They likely contained ceremonial buildings and could have hosted up to 1 million people as recently as 550 years ago. Thanks to new technology like LiDAR, which uses a safe laser to map the forest without harming it, we can explore deeper. In 2019, some scans showed miles of raised roads and pathways and even pyramids over 70 feet tall. They found 26 separate settlements, 2 of which were at least 250 acres each. Damn, that's like 330 soccer fields. It's not certain what happened to the Kasarabi people. Maybe European conquistadors drove them out. Maybe the most baffling ancient civilization is one we've never actually found a trace of. Yep, I'm talking about Atlantis, the grand city that supposedly sank into the ocean. The first mentions of Atlantis come from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who talked about a great city near the Strait of Gibraltar. But for ages, everyone just thought Plato made up Atlantis as a perfect version of his own Athens. So why, about 12,000 years after it supposedly vanished, do we still wonder if it might be real? Well, in the 19th century, U.S. Congressman Ignatius Donnelly wrote a book giving 13 reasons why he thought Atlantis was more than just a myth. Then, in 1965, some folks thought they actually found Atlantis when they discovered the Richat structure, a massive 25-mile-wide dome in Mauritania, Africa. It's so big that you can see the whole thing from space. 2 astronauts flying over the Sahara Desert spotted this giant eye staring back at them and thought they'd made the discovery of a lifetime. Unfortunately, there's no solid evidence linking this structure to Atlantis. It's believed to have formed from volcanic activity about 100 million years ago. But it does look suspicious, doesn't it? Still, we're no closer to knowing the truth. Imagine going back to about 3,300 BCE and finding yourself in South Asia. Welcome to the Harappan civilization. These people were way ahead of their time. They had cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, complete with baked brick houses, sophisticated drainage systems, and even public baths. This place might have had over 5 million people, making it one of the densest regions at the time. They also invented a system of standardized weights that was incredibly useful for traders. And trading they did. These people had connections stretching all the way to the Middle East, thanks to their great skills in metallurgy. They even had a form of ancient branding. The seals were used to stamp clay on trade goods. Despite being so advanced with a thriving urban life, there's a whole bunch of mystery shrouding their language and script. We've got bits and pieces of their writing, but no one's deciphered them yet, even with all the technology we have today. We also still don't know how exactly their society worked. It looks like they didn't flaunt their social status as much as other civilizations. No grand palaces or massive monuments. Instead, their largest buildings might have been granaries. They sure were practical. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Around 1800 BCE, this bustling civilization started to decline, possibly due to shifts in river patterns. As the environment changed, the Harappans packed up, moving towards more hospitable lands. Ever heard of the Minotaur? The beast with a bull's head and a man's body, hunting the bravest travelers in a massive maze. Well, this wasn't just any old tale. It was one of the most popular dramas of the ancient world. And it was inspired by this place, the island of Crete. The Minoans lived here during the Bronze Age. They had stunning palaces, amazing frescoes, and a culture so rich it still fascinates historians to this day. They built places like Knossos, which was so complex with its multi-story buildings and elaborate hallways that it might have inspired the whole labyrinth myth. Their engineering was so ahead of its time that even their drainage systems were more advanced than what many of us have today. Let me know in the comments which of these stories you find the most fascinating, and thanks for watching. Antarctica wasn't always a frozen wasteland. A long time ago, it was full of life. And 56 million years ago, something terrifying stalked its jungles. A giant flesh-eating bird. It was around 6 feet tall and weighed as much as a lion. For millions of years, nothing could challenge it. So why did it disappear? And could there be even bigger predators still hidden beneath the ice? Paleontologists found 2 massive claw bones in Antarctica, sharp, curved, and powerful, belonging to this bird. They were dug up from the Epresian-aged rocks of Seymour Island, which means they're around 40 to 50 million years old. Their shape left no doubt. These were the so-called terror birds. Their scientific name is Forus raceti, some of the most fearsome predators to ever walk the earth. They were flightless and didn't even need wings. Instead, they could sprint at breakneck speeds, like ostriches from a nightmare. For millions of years, these birds ruled South America. But now, for the first time, their presence has been confirmed in Antarctica. No surprise here. Back then, South America and Antarctica were still connected, allowing animals to easily commute between continents. So these birds probably migrated south to adapt to life on Antarctica's prehistoric landmass. It didn't just survive here, it thrived. But at some point, this nightmare of an animal vanished. Why? Most likely because of the temperature changes. Antarctica was cooling, slowly turning into the frozen wasteland we know today. Its prey may have declined, leaving the predator without enough food. Eventually, it disappeared, leaving no descendants behind. Researchers hope that they'll find a complete skeleton eventually. They're also wondering where there might be even bigger species waiting to be discovered. Perhaps these birds evolved into a completely new Antarctic lineage. But for now, all we have are 2 giant, creepy claws. People often think that there are almost no animals or plants in Antarctica. But that's not true at all. Penguins waddle around, and forget the cute tiny ones. Antarctica used to have 6-foot-tall monsters. The emperor penguins are the largest penguin species alive today. They can dive over 1,800 feet deep and hold their breath for over 20 minutes. There were giant ancient penguins around 38 million years ago. They were the size of humans. Fossils show they had long, sharp beaks, making them terrifying hunters of fish and squid. The fish there are also absolutely fascinating. Forget giant squids. Colossal squids are nightmares even bigger. Some reach over 40 feet long with massive, super sharp beaks and eyes the size of dinner plates. Finally, orcas, the apex predators of the Antarctic Ocean. They hunt in packs, working together like a wolf pack of the sea to take down seals, fish, and even massive whales. There are even tiny plants like moss and algae, Antarctic hairgrass and pearlwort. They somehow survive against all odds. There are many other myths going on about Antarctica. For example, some people think that when icebergs break off from glaciers, they immediately start drifting straight into the open ocean until they melt. But the reality is way more chaotic. First, when an iceberg breaks off from a glacier or ice shelf, it has to deal with underwater obstacles. It can stay stuck on the seafloor for decades without moving. Then, they get caught in powerful whirlpools and spin in place for months. One iceberg, a 23A, spent nearly 40 years frozen in place before finally breaking free, only to get caught in a swirling ocean vortex for another 8 months. After that, their paths are influenced by ocean currents, tides, winds, and even underwater topography. They don't just float freely. Their movements are full of literal, unexpected twists. And speaking of glaciers, another strange rumor is that some humans can't travel more than 311 miles inland in Antarctica because of an impassable ice wall, freezing jet fuel, deadly winds, and no oxygen. But this is completely false. Antarctica has been explored by planes, vehicles, and even scientists on foot. There's an entire research station sitting at the South Pole. People live there all year long. The ice wall is real, a massive ice cliff rising above the ocean. But that isn't some secret barrier, it's an ice shelf. These are thick slabs of ice that form when glaciers slowly flow off the land and spread over the ocean. Almost 3/4 of Antarctica's coastline is made up of them, but they don't form some giant ring around the world. Antarctica is one of the most extreme places on Earth, but we've conquered its challenges and we keep learning more about it every year. That's why every year, millions of dollars are poured into keeping research stations running, protecting wildlife, and making sure the people who live there have everything they need. But where does all this money go? Well, Antarctica stations are basically small cities. There's electricity, heating, water purification, food storage, and medical facilities. The biggest station, McMurdo, is basically a town with over 1,000 people in summer. It has everything from a fire station to a gym. The South Pole Station is super deep inland, so it's one of the hardest places to supply. Getting food and fuel there requires airplanes flying thousands of miles in extreme cold. But the internet loves a good mystery. When Google Maps revealed what looked like a massive doorway in Antarctica, conspiracy theorists went wild. People joked about everything from Bigfoot's vacation home to a secret base, or even a Star Trek spaceship hangar hidden in the ice. But there's a way simpler and less exciting explanation. It's actually a grounded iceberg, a chunk of ice that got stuck in shallow water and is now slowly melting. As ice moves across the landscape, it flows around bumps and obstacles, creating odd shapes. The process of melting, breaking apart, and refreezing can carve ice into unexpected forms. Antarctica also has incredibly strong downward blowing winds that sculpt ice into dramatic formations over time. No secret doorway, unfortunately. And speaking of doors, for years, Ushuaia, Argentina, has been called the gateway to Antarctica, the last stop before the icy continent, the place where expeditions begin. But there's another option. Punta Arenas, Chile. Let's compare them. Ushuaia is closer to Antarctica. It's the top departure point for tourists going on cruises. But no regular flights to Antarctica. No major scientific bases operating from here. It's basically controlled by the military, which refuses to allow private flights, only commercially operated ships. Yes, Punta Arenas is further from Antarctica, but 22 countries and global organizations use it as their main base. There are regular flights to Antarctica happening there every year. Private airlines can actually operate here, making it the real air connection to Antarctica. Ushuaia may have the best location physically, but Punta Arenas actually runs the show. Argentina made a huge error in picking its Antarctic airbase. Instead of setting up a simple, accessible base at sea level, they built Marambio Base, very high on rough terrain, completely impossible to reach by land. Everything has to be flown in by helicopter, making operations slow, expensive, and frustrating. For 50 years, Argentina stubbornly stuck to this bad decision, while Chile set up efficient, well-planned bases that the world now uses. If things don't change, Ushuaia will be nothing more than a tourist stop. But what's terrifying is that Antarctica seems to be returning to its past. It's supposed to be the coldest place on Earth, but something shocking happened just recently. For the first time in recorded history, temperatures in Antarctica broke 68 degrees Fahrenheit. This continent is buried under miles of ice. Usually, temperatures there can drop to minus 112 degrees. But in the winter of 2020, scientists recorded an insane 69 degrees on Seymour Island, hotter than many places in Europe at that time. Scientists believe there are several reasons for that. First, there are changes in the way heat moves around the planet's waters. Second, melting permafrost due to the planet warming. It looks like the climate is changing faster than expected.
Seen a good horror movie lately? If you're a fan of those, then you can appreciate a good plot. But What if I told you that Mother Nature is the best scriptwriter ever? Ancient disasters were scarier than any horror movie today. From tsunamis to volcanic eruptions, you'll be shocked by the scale of these events. One natural disaster you definitely don't want to experience is a tsunami. Those gigantic walls of water sweep across the coast and take out everything in their way. And it's nothing new for our planet. Scientists were able to piece together a timeline based on evidence that major tsunamis left. In northern Chile, a large boulder sits high above the Pacific Ocean. Behind it, a desert as far as the eye can see. This 44-ton stone obviously doesn't belong here. It's the result of an ancient tsunami. Waves as high as a 6-story building carried boulders like pebbles. Researchers estimate this happened in 1420. But how can they possibly know this? In the 15th century, there were no written records in the region. Time for some detective work. Archaeologists discovered that around the same time, there was a tsunami in Japan, on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. The ground shook off the coast of Chile. That's how the tsunami was created. Then the wave traveled nearly 2/5 of the Earth's circumference. That's one tireless tsunami. But this wasn't a one-time event. Evidence suggests that a similar event happened 3,800 years ago. Ancient people abandoned their coastal villages around this time. They were moving inland. How did they know it was time to go? There's evidence of erosion due to strong currents, telltale signs of an ancient tsunami. As you know from school textbooks, oxygen is 21% of the air we breathe. But it wasn't always a part of Earth's atmosphere. Oxygen was missing during the first half of our planet's lifespan. Carbon dioxide and methane were the name of the game back then. CO2 is what makes our drinks fizz. But isn't the other gas dangerous? Yes, because you can't smell methane. And that's the reason there was no life on Earth billions of years ago. So how did we get from methane to oxygen? In come the cyanobacteria. This group of microbes started to evolve some 2.7 billion years ago. These tiny microbes mastered photosynthesis, converting sunlight into energy. And the byproduct of this process was, you've guessed it, oxygen. Soon it started escaping from water into the atmosphere. There, it reacted with methane, and over time, O2 replaced it completely. Scientists named this process the Great Oxidation Event. But how could it be bad? After all, we're alive thanks to it. All that oxygen acted as a poison for anaerobic organisms. And no, these are not life forms that didn't do aerobics or Pilates. The term simply means that these microorganisms didn't need oxygen to grow. Too much oxygen, and they would be goners. And that's precisely what happened. Scientists spoke of an oxygen overshoot that changed Earth's atmosphere for good. The disappearance of most anaerobic organisms was an early example of an extinction event. They didn't like the atmosphere at the time and decided to step down. But look on the bright side. They made room for oxygen-loving humans to enter the picture. Let's go to Turkey. No, not the seaside resorts that tourists visit in the summer, but the region of Anatolia in the southeast of the country. Göbekli Tepe is the world's oldest known temple site. It dates back to the Neolithic period. Scientists found a stone pillar here that tells a tale of an ancient disaster. They presume that the pillar is commemorative. Today, humans still build similar structures to mark an important event or a person. Just one example is the Washington Memorial. It was built in honor of the first American president, George Washington. But the pillar in Turkey doesn't commemorate a happy event. Scientists believe it shows a devastating occurrence, a comet crashing into the Earth. The event must have been destructive. There are also other signs on the monument. These symbols align with the setup of the night sky stars for the year 10,950 BCE. The date astounded the researchers. It matched their earlier research of an ice core sample in Greenland. This showed that a comet fragment hit our planet around the same time. The archaeological site could have easily been an ancient observatory. And whoever worked at it observed a cataclysmic event. The impact must have been so powerful that it changed the Earth's rotational axis. That's the imaginary pole going through our planet from top to bottom. That ancient comet must have packed a punch to knock the blue planet off balance. Have you heard of the city of Tal el Hammam in the valley of the Jordan River? The reason why your answer is probably no is that the city doesn't exist today. It completely disappeared around the year 1650 BCE. It was one of the three major cities in this part of the Middle East. Together, these three cities had a population bigger than Palm Springs today. At the time, Tal el Hammam was a metropolis. It even had high-rises, 5-story buildings constructed using mud bricks. But archaeologists found strange markings on them. The bricks melted as they were exposed to high temperatures. Yes, sound the fire alarm. Some sort of disaster had caused a major fire. Archaeological finds pointed to a suspect for such damage: a rock from space. So, where was the crater? This comet, or an asteroid, never made it to the ground. It was traveling at high speed, so it disintegrated before hitting the ground. Such an event is called an airburst. The largest witnessed meteor airburst happened over Tunguska in the north of Asia in 1908. Scientists estimated that the airburst in Tal el Hammam happened 2.5 miles above the city. This event released a lot of energy. Air temperature quickly rose to 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to set clothes and wood on fire in an instant. Mud bricks and tools made from metal start to melt when exposed to such heat. This would explain the evidence scientists unearthed. But there was one more find: salt. The event was so powerful that it distributed salt over the region around the Dead Sea. Any farmer will tell you that salty soil and crops don't go well together. People started moving away from the area because they couldn't grow food. Imagine an island with whitewashed villages surrounded by a sapphire blue sea. Such a place exists in reality. It's the island of Santorini. But the history of this place hides a tale of destruction. The island is of volcanic origin. This means that a violent eruption created it some 3,000 years ago. Now there are two islands. The bigger one is shaped like a horseshoe. When you look at them from above, the two islands look like they form a circle. That's because they were once a single island. It had a large mountain and was round in shape. But then it all changed almost overnight. One of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history tore Santorini apart. The earth trembled, tsunamis formed, and clouds of ash filled the sky. A daunting image. People felt the eruption hundreds of miles away. When it was all over, seawater rushed into the caldera of the former volcano. That's why the water in the lagoon has such a beautiful color. Scientists know so much about Santorini's past because of an unlikely assistant: a tree. The juniper tree, to be exact. People use its aromatic wood for everything from furniture to making pencils. On the Greek island, its rings revealed the tale of the ancient eruption. As a tree grows, it doesn't only go up, it expands sideways as well. Each new layer of bark adds a ring to the trunk. It takes a year for one ring to form. And on Santorini, one ring was unnaturally pale. The scientists did the math and voila, they dated the eruption to 1560 BCE.
It's 1898, and you're taking part in excavations in Saqqara. This place, not far away from Cairo, is full of ancient tombs and pyramids. You're in your Indiana Jones mood and hope to find something really phenomenal to become famous. Gold, manuscripts, treasure maps, mummies of famous pharaohs. Wait, a wooden bird? You're really disappointed as it looks like a regular toy. An old one, but still. Little do you know that years later, someone would propose that your bird was actually an ancient monoplane. So the artifact, nicknamed the Saqqara bird, is made of a sycamore tree. The birdie has a wingspan of just 7 inches and weighs around 40 grams. A perfect original souvenir from Egypt, I would say. It's over 2,000 years old and looks pretty plain, without any carvings of feathers or other intricate ornaments. It has a beak and eyes though, which makes our find look like a hawk, the emblem of the deity Horus. Its tail is rather unusual as it's squared, looks weirdly upright, and it seems like the sunken part of it was the place for a now missing piece. Humans love solving a good mystery, so there have been several attempts to explain the use of the birdie. First, quite simply, is that it was a ceremonial object. The second idea is that it was a toy for a child from some well-off family. It could have been some sort of boomerang, which was a popular concept in ancient Egypt. Then there was a theory that the bird had been used as a weather vane. But this one has been debunked as the figure doesn't have any holes or markings, except for the one made at the museum in Cairo to fix the exhibit on a stick. So there was no way to hang it in the past. Almost a century after the bird was found, Egyptologist Dr. Khalil Masiha proposed a new theory that it could have been a model of a monoplane. He believed the bird was missing a horizontal tailplane. Otherwise, it had its wings set at a right angle, similar to that of modern planes. It could have worked to generate the aerodynamic lift necessary for flights. Dr. Masiha also claimed that it was common at that time to place miniature models of technological inventions in tombs. So, did the ancient Egyptians really invent the plane in 200 BCE? That would make the Wright brothers, who are considered the inventors of aviation, really upset. They made one of their first flights only in 1903. There's just one way to know for sure, and that is to test the model. But you know, the ancient museum in Cairo would unlikely let one of their cherished exhibits fly around like a toy. That's why glider designer Martin Gregory built a similar model, this time of balsa wood, and concluded that even with the missing tailplane, the plane wasn't much of a flyer. Case solved? Not really. This didn't sound convincing enough to the History Channel, so they invited an aerodynamics expert to build another replica of the bird. He tested it in weather conditions similar to those in Egypt and was impressed with the little plane's abilities. So, if they did invent the prototype of a plane back in the times of pharaohs, it would be a good example of an oupart. That's an out-of-place artifact, an object that's way ahead of its time in terms of technology or history. And the Saqqara bird isn't the only example of such a revolutionary concept. In 1901, a group of divers retrieved the Antikythera mechanism from an underwater shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera. It's been dubbed the world's first analog computer, and it's currently dated around 100 BCE. The bronze mechanism could tell the position of the sun, moon, planets, and stars, as well as the lunar phase, the dates of upcoming solar eclipses, and even the speed at which the moon moves through the sky. No one's sure who used it and how or where it was made, but it's obvious that it's extremely precise and way too advanced for its time. The first flushing toilets in the world were invented in the middle of the 20th century. Just kidding. The ancient Minoans on the Mediterranean island of Crete and the Indus Valley civilization both came up with this brilliant invention at the same time, around 4,000 years ago. The plumbing and sanitation were so well done that no one managed to design anything better until 2,000 years later. One ancient Minoan lavatory was discovered at the Palace of Knossos. It looks like it had a wooden seat set over a tunnel that directed water from a rooftop reservoir to an underground sewer. Other varieties got water from jugs. Only the super rich people could afford all this glory. So if you wanted to shop for real estate back then, the flushing toilet would be a telltale sign you were in the rich neighborhood. Automated doors became a cool, seemingly new invention back in 1931. But the technology behind them is actually much older. Think the 1st century CE old. Mathematician and engineer Heron of Alexandria came up with a hydraulic system to open and close temple doors. To bring it into action, you need to light a fire to produce heat. There was a brass pot under the fire, half filled with water. The inventor connected the brass pot to containers that acted as weights. When the fire was burning, the water moved into the containers. They went down and pulled the ropes. It was nothing like a supermarket door that opens in front of you before you even have time to think. Heron's door took hours to open, and there was no way to stop the process. That's why they only opened the doors once a day before people entered the temple, to add some mysticism at the temple during ceremonies. Spooky. Looks like the first ever battery was invented in Baghdad around 2,000 years ago. A German archaeologist found this oval-shaped clay jar in 1938. Scientists are still not sure what purpose it served and who exactly invented it. There is a theory that it was used for electroplating objects with precious metals. When they filled it with a weak acid like vinegar, the battery produced around 1 volt of electricity. Another theory says it was a vessel for sacred scrolls. Would you like to buy contact lenses designed by Leonardo da Vinci himself? In 1508, he invented a glass lens with a funnel on one side. You were supposed to wear it with water inside to improve your vision. Sounds a bit uncomfortable, doesn't it? So, around a century later, French scientist René Descartes decided to improve the idea and make the cornea contact the future lenses. Contacts because they contact your eyes, get it? The glass tube with liquid did help improve vision, but blinking was sadly impossible. 2.5 centuries later, new technologies in the glass industry let scientists design contacts that would fit in the eye and even let the wearer blink. Thanks, guys! Still, those lenses were made of heavy blown glass and didn't let the eye breathe. About 50 years later, contacts became plastic, lightweight, unbreakable, and scratch-resistant, but still covering the entire eye. And then, in 1948, an English optical technician accidentally sanded down a plastic lens and figured out they'd still be in place even if they covered only the cornea. Imagine you're living in 19th century London and need to send a message to New York. It would have taken about 10 days to get there by ship. So when delivery time went from days to hours in 1858, it was a true sensation. The first message was sent by Queen Victoria herself. It was all made possible thanks to the transatlantic telegraph cable, running under the ocean. Sadly, the new cool invention only lasted a few weeks. It took years to bring it back to life.
Phantasmagory is said to be the first animated film ever. It was made in 1908, and it's one of the earliest examples of hand-drawn animation. But did you know that ancient people entertained children with cartoons about 2.6 million years ago? A new study reveals that ancient people were the ones who first made pictures look animated. How? They carved pictures of animals on stones and placed them around fires. When the light starts bouncing around, those ancient animals just can't help but shake it and shimmy. The prehistoric carvings come to life in the flickering firelight, with those animals jumping in and out of focus like they're ready to party. Imagine how fun it would have been for prehistoric families to sit around a fire and create these animated carvings. It turns out that even some of the ancient wall paintings and carvings found in caves were inspired by their appearance in the moving light and shadows of flames. So, basically, these old-timey carvings were made to come to life when firelight hit them. And now researchers made a movie showing that cool effect on a 3D model of some horse engravings. The study says our brains are wired to see moving things in changing light, which is why these carvings probably mattered to our ancestors. In other words, cave people were like, hey, let's carve some cool stuff on this rock, and when we light a fire, It'll look like it's moving. And now these scientists were like, "That's awesome! Let's make a movie to show this, everyone!" Andy Needham and his teammates used modern scanning and virtual reality tech to study 50 flat carved rocks called plaquettes made of limestone. These rocks were found in southern France back in the 1800s and now sit in a museum in London. They are covered in 77 realistic carvings of all sorts of animals, like horses, reindeer, and chamois. Apparently, Homo sapiens, with a lot of time on their hands, made these engravings a whopping 12,000 to 16,000 years ago. Needham realized that many of these carved rocks were harmed by fire, some covered in white ash, others dried or fractured because of heat. Upon closer examination, he discovered pink bands of discoloration resulting from iron deposits in the stone. What's more interesting is that the animal engravings were often superimposed on top of each other, sometimes even melded together or fitted around each other like some kind of prehistoric animal jigsaw puzzle. Rather than tossing out the old and starting anew, the ancient artists took animal body parts to create new hybrids. For instance, one of the rocks depicts both a horse and a wild cattle-like creature known as a bovid. In this masterpiece of prehistoric art, the horse's abdomen and neck become the back and neck of the bovid, while the horse's head forms the bovid's ear. What a creative way of recycling. Researchers believe that the prehistoric rocks from Montestric were used as primetime entertainment for our ancestors. More than one person carved the animals. People from different levels of skills showed their artistic glory, and it was a group effort. The fact that these rocks were found together also suggests that this was a community activity. So it's like families were all gathered around the TV, carving rocks and cheering on their favorite carved animals. Who needs Netflix when you have Paleolithic TV? The engravings on these rocks and the signs they were exposed to heat suggest they were created to look like they were moving. Sometimes you see different animals in different poses, so one would come to life, and then another, and then a different one. It's like a Stone Age version of Disney. Similar techniques might have influenced some of the ancient cave paintings, such as those at the breathtaking Chauvet Cave in southeastern France. The animal portraits there are also overlaid on each other, and some look like they were heated by fires underneath them, which means that our prehistoric ancestors might have been the first animators in the world. Alright, since we talked about young people's favorite pastime activity, shall we take a trip back in time to discover the world's oldest toys? One of the most ancient toys discovered was a simple ball made from clay and found in the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia. It might seem like a simple toy, but our ancestors were playing with them as far back as 3000 BC. But back then, they didn't have fancy video games or elaborate board games, so a ball was the pinnacle of entertainment. But the Mesopotamians weren't the only ones having fun. In ancient Greece, children played with dolls made of clay. In Egypt, kids had toys shaped like animals, but they also had dolls made from materials like clay, papyrus, and ivory. But the most impressive thing about these dolls? They had movable limbs. That's right, our ancient ancestors were playing with articulated dolls before it was cool. But it's not all fun and games. Toys also had a practical purpose back in the day. In fact, many of the toys discovered by archaeologists were actually used to teach children important skills. For example, Egyptian children played with dolls that were shaped like doctors, which helped them learn about medicine and healthcare. And let's not forget about the toys that were used to train future warriors. In ancient China, kids played with toy horses and chariots, which helped them prepare for a life of battle. Talk about getting a head start on your career. Moving on to primitive board games, which have been around for over 5,000 years. The oldest board game is called Senet, and was discovered in ancient Egyptian tombs. It's a bit like a cross between chess and backgammon, and it was so popular that it was played for over 2,000 years. Now that's a game with staying power. But let's not forget about toys for the little ones. Archaeologists have found ancient rattles and whistles that were used to entertain even younger members of their families. And if you thought your kid's toy collection was impressive, just wait until you hear about the ancient Egyptian princess who had over 100 wooden toys in her chamber. But perhaps the most surprising toy of all was the yo-yo. That's right. The yo-yo has been around for over 2,000 years. It was first invented in ancient Greece and was often used in battle, believe it or not. But eventually people realized that it was much more fun to just play with it and do tricks. Marbles are also around as a toy that has been entertaining kids, and some adults, for thousands of years. Archaeologists have found evidence of marble dating back to around 5,000 years ago in the Indus Valley civilization. Back in those days, marbles were made from all sorts of things. Want to take a wild guess? Okay, I'll tell you. Fruit pits and small pieces of smoothed stone. That's right, those ancient kids were getting creative with their playthings. Some artisans even went the extra mile and crafted marbles from clay. Let's head back to ancient Egyptians and their adorable miniature boats made from ivory, wood, and clay. These miniatures may be acknowledged as toys, but they were also meant to represent crossing over to the other side. Viking kids had similar types of items too. A wooden toy boat over 1,000 years old was found on a farmstead near the coast of Norway. This toy looked like a real boat, and it would have been the ultimate cool thing, just like how kids today go nuts over race cars and drones. You can imagine little ones back then showing off their toy boats to their friends. Many of these toys are still pretty fun to play with today. There are many others left aside, like toy soldiers and spinning tops. Do you want to know more about ancient toys or gadgets from the early days of cinema?
In 1850, French scientist Auguste Mariette went to Egypt looking for manuscripts, but accidentally found a head of a sphinx sticking out of the dunes. He cleared the sand and figured out the sphinx was guiding the entrance to some underground construction. Several months later, he finally entered the Serapeum of Saqqara. Inside, he found an enormous granite sarcophagi with remnants of 64 bulls. Scientists are still amazed by the tech that the ancient Egyptians used to transport those enormous boxes. The Serapeum was built around the year 3000 before the Common Era. It was an underground tomb built to honor the sacred Apis bulls of ancient Egypt. It had a long hallway, almost 500 feet long, with giant stone rooms on both sides. Some of the sarcophagi weighed as much as 50 average cars, and all of them were made with super precision, with exact 90-degree angles. These sarcophagi were beautifully decorated with hieroglyphs and carvings that told stories about the lives and importance of the Apis bulls. Now, there are 24 sarcophagi left. In ancient Egypt, Apis bulls were very special animals connected to the deity Ptah. They thought the bulls carried Ptah's spirit and wisdom, helped the pharaoh, and protected the Egyptians. Priests looked for special markings on young bulls to find Apis bulls. It could be a white triangle on its forehead, which symbolized divine light, a shape on its back like a vulture's wing, and a scarab shape under its tongue, which stood for rebirth. If a bull had these signs, they believed it was chosen by Ptah and treated it like royalty. The chosen bulls lived in a special temple in Memphis, the city where they worshipped Ptah. They received the best care and offerings from visitors who wanted their blessings. When an Apis bull passed away, it was treated with great honor and mummified. When Mariette entered the Serapeum, he noticed traces of rollers on the gallery's floor and found 2 wooden horizontal winches. Each had 8 levers. Later, other explorers saw double rails. The burial chambers were lower than the hallway floor. To get the boxes into place, workers filled the chambers with sand so the sarcophagi could be rolled in straight. Then they slowly removed the sand to gently lower the boxes into perfectly cut spaces in the bedrock. A carved stone sign found in the Serapeum said it took 28 days to move just one sarcophagus and its lid into its spot during the time of Ptolemy II. The extreme precision of the sarcophagi with 90-degree angles also has an explanation. Ancient Egyptians wrote texts, or rather, papyrus, on geometry a long time ago. It shows that they knew the approximate number pi and could calculate the volume of a pyramid with its top cut off. If they could figure out complicated math like that back then, it makes sense that they could also carve perfectly flat surfaces 500 years later. All this sounds pretty legit, but some people think certain things don't add up here. The size of boxes is way larger than the size of bulls, yet they buried pharaohs in tiny coffins that barely fit their bodies. The sarcophagi are made out of granite with crazy precision, and they could have just used limestone, which would have made things way easier. The transportation of the boxes seems pretty simple, but only in theory. If one person could pull about 440 pounds, then at least 250 people would be needed to pull just one box. The tunnels in the Serapeum are really narrow, only about 2 feet wider than the boxes themselves. There's no way hundreds of people could have squeezed into those tight spaces to pull the boxes. And even if they did, how would they turn the box in the cramped corridor, lower it into its niche, and place it perfectly in the middle? Somehow, they did this 24 times, and every box is centered perfectly. Plus, the chambers were dusty, and there were no signs of soot from lamps. This means they must have worked in almost complete darkness. The real use of the boxes could also be different. A long time ago, even before the Egyptian pharaohs ruled, the local people already knew how to use fermentation. It happens when tiny organisms called yeast eat certain ingredients like starch and turn them into gas and ethanol. So someone in ancient Egypt probably put food like barley, bread, and even meat inside a giant stone box, then closed it tight with a heavy lid. These stone boxes, carved from granite, were so precisely made that they were almost completely sealed, so nothing could escape from it. As the yeast inside the box started working, it created more and more CO2 gas. It built up pressure inside the box. The granite boxes were incredibly strong. They could handle more pressure than a car tire can hold. When granite was squeezed under such pressure, its crystals produced a tiny electric charge. This effect was possible because granite contains quartz, a material that reacts to pressure this way. The process also needed meat or animal parts, possibly to help the yeast grow better. Meat contains something called oleic acid, which yeast needs to keep growing and to survive the bad effects of the ethanol it produces. As the pressure inside the box kept growing, the combination of gases and electricity made these boxes not just ancient fridges, but powerful energy systems. Over time, the pressure inside got so strong that it could push the lid open and the gas would escape with a pop. But when people rediscovered the Serapeum in 1850, they found old drawings that showed piles of stones stacked on top of some of the box lids. So, someone long ago probably tried to make the lids even heavier by adding extra weight to make it harder for the gas pressure to push them open. This extra weight also meant the quartz crystals in the granite could keep creating more electricity under all that pressure. If someone opened one of these stone boxes thousands of years later, they would only find bones from bulls that were placed in the box. And that's exactly what Mariette discovered in the 1850s. They opened the Serapeum for visitors soon after the first excavations in the second half of the 19th century. Prince of Wales even had a luncheon with his guests in one of the sarcophagi. Sands and earthquakes made the site inaccessible for a while, but now you can visit it again and try to solve the mystery yourself. With new tech, we could have answers to many other historical mysteries soon. A team of scientists at Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History recently used a special CT scanner to learn more about ancient Egyptian mummies without unwrapping them. They gently rolled 26 mummies on custom carts out to the parking lot, where the scanner was waiting. It took thousands of detailed X-ray pictures of each mummy and their coffins. When all the pictures were put together, they created 3D images that showed what was inside, the skeletons, and some artifacts. The scientists hope these images will help them understand ancient Egyptian burial practices from over 3,000 years ago. Even though the scanning process only took 4 days, it might take 3 years to study all the data. But scientists were able to learn some personal details about the mummies. One of the most popular mummified individuals at the museum, Lady Cheneta, was a woman who lived in ancient Egypt about 3,000 years ago. It looks like she passed away in her late 30s or early 40s. To make sure her body looked complete for the afterlife, embalmers put stuffing in her neck to keep it from collapsing. They also placed artificial eyes in her sockets, so she would have eyes in the next world. She was wrapped in fancy linen and placed in a beautifully decorated coffin. The scans revealed that it had been carefully crafted with a slit at the back, which embalmers used to fit the body. There were also some artistic details on the surface, like markings for her knees. It looks like her burial was on the scale of a high-end luxury car.
There are several places on Earth, awesome and mysterious, that evoke so many questions that some people believe they were built by or with the help of extraterrestrial intelligence. Let's explore those mystical destinations. In the hills above Cusco, Peru, you'll find an ancient Inca fortress called Sacsayhuaman. Some of the massive stones of its walls weigh as much as 360 tons. They're cut and fitted together surprisingly precisely, and no mortar is used. The stones used for this construction were transported over 20 miles from quarries. But how did the Inca do it? Did they ask for extraterrestrial help? Perhaps. But archaeologists disagree. They have found evidence that the Inca used advanced engineering techniques involving ropes and levers to move and fit the stones. Okay, let's move on to the Nazca lines. You can see them in the deserts of southern Peru. In this area, more than 800 lines and 300 shapes stretch across the deserted landscape. Those are called geoglyphs and are best viewed from the sky. That's how theories about alien involvement popped up. The lines were made by removing the top layer of reddish rocks to reveal the lighter ground beneath. And this is a pretty simple technique. You don't even need to use modern tools. The purpose of the Nazca lines is still a mystery, but most experts believe that they had some ceremonial significance. Now, the stone circle of Stonehenge must have something to do with extraterrestrial visitors, right? Those stones, some weighing as much as 50 tons, were brought from quarries hundreds of miles away. No wonder many people offered theories about alien intervention. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but archaeologists have proven that the monument could have actually been built with the help of technologies available around 5,000 years ago, such as wooden sleds and rollers. The exact purpose of Stonehenge is still under debate. Its builders could have used the stone circle to track the sun or to perform astronomy-related rituals. The next breath-stopping place on our list is the Egyptian pyramids, namely the pyramids of Giza just outside Cairo. They were built over 4,500 years ago. The largest of them, the Great Pyramid, is made of millions of 2-ton stones which are arranged with super precision. The pyramids also align with the stars of Orion's belt, and this makes some people believe that aliens might have helped to build these awe-inspiring constructions. Experts disagree. They say that although the exact methods the Egyptian builders used are still unclear, the pyramids are undoubtedly a human achievement. Ramps, levers, and a large workforce were likely used to move the stones into place. Then, how about Teotihuacan, located near modern-day Mexico City? Once, it was a thriving metropolis. The city was built more than 2,000 years ago, and its size and advanced architecture make people wonder if aliens played a key role in its construction. In reality, the city was created by several cultures, including the Maya and Zapotec. It was a center for trade, agriculture, and other activities, but it does have some connection to space. Its layout, with the pyramids aligned to celestial events, shows a deep understanding of astronomy. And still, it was the work of human hands. Now, let's travel to one of the most mysterious islands in the world, Easter Island. Nearly 900 stone figures known as moai stand there, some towering over 30 feet tall. These statues were carved from volcanic rock more than 1,000 years ago and moved across the island to their final resting places. This impressive feat, as well as the slightly creepy appearance of the figures, makes you think about some alien intervention, doesn't it? Well, another disappointment. It's believed that the Rapa Nui people used wooden sleds or rolling logs to transport the statues, and there's no evidence that extraterrestrials were involved. The last destination isn't even on Earth. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 orbiter captured an image of what seemed to be a face on Mars. It sparked numerous theories about alien activity. The face seems to be staring up from the Martian surface, like evidence of the activity of an ancient alien civilization. But more detailed images from 2001, taken by the Mars Global Surveyor, revealed that the so-called face was just a natural mesa, an isolated flat-topped hill with steep sides.